You're good to go.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. So we are now under 7.1.1. We have a presentation provided by John Greer, Executive Director of the Niagara Spca and Humane Society, regarding the Niagara Spca services and the 2021 year review. John, welcome. Thank you for your patience this evening. You have 10 minutes for your presentation and we look forward to it. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Council. Thank you for having me. I just wanted to briefly provide an update on some of the services Niagara Spca provide to the town of Lincoln. We'll just start off quickly with a couple of pictures. Some councillors and possibly Mayor Easton may remember the middle picture at the top is our mobile surgical animal hospital. And we actually did a clinic just before council started a couple of years ago before the pandemic started. So we'll get through this quickly. I know it's been a long night for you guys too. So we'll get through it and then I'll go for any questions. Next slide, please. So the Niagara Spca and Humane Society is our new name. We amalgamated with the Niagara Falls Humane Society in the Weldon District. Collectively, we've served the Niagara region since 1947 as separate organizations. And we felt through the amalgamation, we could resource better, have better services, and reach our communities better. Next slide. So we provide animal control services for 8 of the municipalities, including Haldimand County. And we've just recently actually procured an animal control contract with the Mississaugas of the new credit just outside there. So that's a new and historic thing that we're on, actually an Indigenous community providing services. We also provide animal sheltering services for all of our municipalities. And we currently operate a high volume, low cost spay neuter clinic and pet owners from Mount Niagara and as far away as Toronto access. So we keep the costs low. That's one of our missions, is to reduce the over pet population. And I believe we're booked about till next February of 23. And I've already pointed out that our mobile veterinary clinic, unfortunately, it's been off the road for the last couple of years due to the pandemic, but we will be getting it up and running and visiting all of our municipal partners this year. Next slide, please. So some of our regular enforcement operations that we typically see, loose dogs, any type of animal complaint, we deal with excessive barking, we do dog bite, muzzle orders, and of course we take care of all of the pet licensing. And that keeps our officers out that way pretty busy. So next slide. So in high complaint areas, we have a targeted enforcement area where we work with the town's bylaw, where we will actually, it's called our stepped up enforcement program. And we actually will put our vehicles in that area and we'll do extra patrols in the area where parks, such not that we might have a higher complaint. Another thing that we thought of, and it's worked out really, really well, it's a pilot project, but we now have officers on bike patrol. And we will be we rolled it out as a pilot project, and now we'll be doing it in 22 through the summer. So we'll do the trails, the parks, anywhere again where we need high enforcement, but our vehicles actually can't get to. Next slide. So yeah, so that's just a little bit, I guess I got ahead of myself there, but just to point it out, it's education enforcement. We are not issuing tickets at this point in time. We are handing out pamphlets saying why it's important to have your dogs leashed, the fact that they might encounter wildlife, other dogs, makes the trails for our seniors, keeps them safer. Next slide. And yeah, so that's just a slide just to show you kind of what our bike patrols are doing, how they're doing it. We want to make it education first. We believe in the education first approach rather than the enforcement. We get high compliance with that when they actually speak to the officers that are out there as part of our community engagement team. We can explain things to them a little better. They go away with a pamphlet and usually that works out. We do take some identifying information so that if we have repeat offenders, we would actually go to a ticket and issue a ticket. Next slide. So that just gives you a breakdown of the bylaw complaints for 21 that we actually received. So loose dogs 40, excrements, dog bites, muzzle orders, barking, other types of complaints. Might be a neighbor thing where we go out and we deal with them. And again, we provide education such as fencing issues, or, just to keep it. And then in our park and targeted patrols, we actually did 332 of those for the year. Next slide. These were our admissions. Wildlife is always really high in the more rural areas. So that's basically our shelter admissions. Out of all of the shelter admissions that came in, all but 3 cats, and that was due to our veterinarian for medical issues, were readopted out or reclaimed by their owners. So that was for the entire year. It was just 3 cats that had to be unfortunately euthanized. But like I say, at the our vet's instructions. Next slide. So yeah, 90% of the cats who entered the shelter were adopted out. That's really high. So we do run an off-site cat adoption center in a mall, and that keeps our cat numbers. Humane societies throughout the province struggle with the cats. The dogs are usually pretty, they get adopted out. We don't see as many of them coming in. So to date, since we opened, we're just over 7,800 cats adopted just from the mall location, as well as our shelter locations. Next slide. We're really proud of this. So during the pandemic, it's a thing that the organization and myself had looked at previously anyway. We're trying to keep pets in homes. We don't want them ending up in our shelters because of circumstances of people maybe can't afford to feed their pets, or they need some medical care that we can provide. So basically, we did 149 food supply drop-offs. So we did door drop-offs to anyone that called us. It was food, it was litter, whatever anybody needed to keep that pet within their home. And we also delivered over 3,000 pounds of pet food to the homeless shelters throughout, so that if they saw the people coming through, they could help. 8 of the municipalities, all the municipalities took part in this program. And we, of course, we had our corporate partners that supplied us with the food and necessities that we needed. And it's a program coming out of the pandemic that we're going to continue. We want to get more community-based, so we've engaged this community engagement team to get out into the community, educate, help people keep their pets at home, and hopefully we go from there. We realize the human-animal bond is very, very important to people, and that's the direction the organization really wants to focus on. Next slide. And that's just one of the drop-offs that we actually did to the Hope Center. We just load it up, we drop it off, and like I say, they see clients that we may not see. So again, it helps to keep those pets within the home. We also have a care program as part, it's not on the slides, but as part of our program where anyone that ends up in a homeless shelter or a women's shelter, we will take their pets in for free. We will have our veterinarian do an initial intake. We'll do any medical issues that we can with them, and we'll keep that pet until they can actually find housing. And next slide, and I believe that's the last. Yeah, and that's just a few of the ways you can follow us. And I thank you for your time, and I'll open it up if anyone has any questions.
Thank you very much, John. Are there any questions from committee for Mr. Greer? Councillor Pachariba.
Thanks, Chair Bernay, and thanks, John, for coming tonight. Question with respect to, I guess, calls in to your office. So I've had a number of residents, they'll get home from work and that's when they'll see the infractions, dogs running loose. The only off-leash dog park we have is at Kinsman Park. So, and a call goes in and they're told the operating hours are 8 to 5. Is that true, or what's your scene there?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. The animal control hours are actually set by council, and that's what we actually receive as far as payment for those particular hours. So after hours, we do have officers on the road for emergencies only. So sick or injured animals, or if there's any emergency responses like police, fire that need us, we would go out. And so there are officers on the road 20, and we will, if we got a call, say for a public safety issue or a dog may be running in and out of traffic, the officer would respond to that. For stray dogs and stuff, like I say, that's sat and compensated by council. That's the SAT hours that the council have given us.
Okay, thank you for that. So, so then the best recourse for that would be, so as a counselor, I'll get a call and then I reach out to bylaw, and then bylaw facilitates I guess a patrol with your group to that's over and above to rectify the situation. Is that connecting the dots properly to do that then?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we work very closely with your bylaw department, but anything usually animal related, it would be our officers that actually attend to the call. And if we see anything where bylaw would be involved, we'll work together. We've worked with your bylaw officers on a couple of the larger grow ops where they have concerns, but of course there's dogs protecting different things. So our officers will go in and secure the dogs, but generally it would be our officers that actually attend. Loose dogs, I mean, the officers will go out. A loose dog's always more of a tricky one because a lot of times, just depending where the officer is, by the time they get there. So usually our dispatch, we have a 24-hour dispatch system that our officers are always tuned into. They might ask the person if it's a friendly animal, if they can contain it until they get there. Chances are if they don't or they're not willing to, by the time the officer actually arrives at that area, the dog is probably moved on. And we'll get another call from somewhere else if it's a more urban area. So I would say, to answer your question, yeah, I get the two work very close hand in hand. We work very closely with your bylaw department. But if it's animal related, they will normally send it to us and we'll follow up from there and then we'll coordinate from there.
Okay, awesome. And just to follow up, Councillor Bernay, if I may. So just I love the idea of the bike patrol, John. I think that's terrific. I'm going to invite you or one of your team members on Saturday. I think it's June 2nd is Bike Month and our opening of our Rotary Park, and our Active Transportation Committee is planning a slow roll that will go around and look at our parks. So if your officers want to come along to get the lay of the land, more than welcome, and I will personally ride with them. So thank you again, John. Thanks for everything you do. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And we'll definitely do that. I can't promise I will be on one of the bikes, but our officers will be.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you, Councillor Patriva. Councillor Timmers, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Bernay. Through to Mr. Greer. Thank you for being here tonight. I haven't forgotten about that mobile veterinary clinic. So I'm wondering, once you get rolling again, how will you determine which areas and how we advertise so we know when you possibly are coming to the town of Lincoln?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we'll be reaching out to our municipal partners and letting them know once, again, everything's back on the road and we're ready to go. And we just want to make sure all of the restrictions are out there. Usually how we determine it is basically through some of the community services within the area. So the township will reach out to those, see where there's some areas that there may be the need. But it's licensed for the province of Ontario. We can literally park it anywhere. And like I say, we can park it right outside council and do a clinic, a mobile clinic there, or we can park it in the neighborhood. So we'll make sure we reach out and to the town and let them know when the program's up and running.
I think that's great. It's a very valuable program. So I'd be very happy to see it out on the roads again. Just a question around barking. I know I saw you had a number of complaints on barking. So what are the rules around that? I know we have a noise bylaw in our town, but can you just go over how would someone be, breaking the rule of barking? Is it certain hours or?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So basically, your noise bylaw is actually 24 hours a day, right? The people think it's a certain time. It's not. The noise bylaw applies 24 hours a day. What our officers try to do when we get a noise complaint regarding barking is they will get as close to the residents as possible. And we usually try to figure out excessive barking is anything 20 minutes and over in a 1 hour period. So, we don't want to ticket or enforce anything for the dog that barks because someone comes to the door. We also offer solutions. If people have their dogs outside and it's a neighbor thing, there's little barking dog houses that you can get that just emits a high frequency that throws the dog off track. So we try it through our education first. If it's excessive and it's continuing, so we ask, because our officers can't be there all the time, we have an evidence sheet of the barking, the times, the dates that it happened, and then our officers will actually go to part 1 summonses with a fine, and if it continues, we go to part 3 and we actually go to court on it.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I just have one more question, if that's okay.
Go ahead, Councillor.
I live in the rural areas, and there's often a lot of wildlife, sick raccoons, injured wildlife. And I'm always confused about who will come and pick up that animal. And I know not too long ago we had a sick raccoon, and I made a call and I was told just to leave it alone for 24 hours and see what happens. And do you go out and pick up like sick raccoons or injured wildlife? Or is that, not your, in your, that you do?
Through you, Mr. Chair, anything that's sick or injured, we will come. So we follow the Minister of Natural Resources guidelines, which is, it's hard to determine if they're sick or not. Like, people see raccoons out during the day, so they think they're sick or they're whatever. So the guidelines from the MNR is the 24-hour rule for anything that's orphaned or still able to get around. And within that 24-hour period, if it's still there or whatever, then that's when we would come out. The ministry doesn't like us going in and removing. So we showed up and it was a raccoon or wildlife fox or whatever hit by car, we're going to remove that animal and get it to our veterinary services. But if it's just sick, we don't know. Like, we get updates on our rabies reports. There's been no rabies in the Niagara region for a long time. Raccoons will suffer from distemper from dogs. And it's, there's signs that our officers kind of know when it's called in, what it is, or it's just maybe something that's odd behavior that, the weather can play a big factor in it. But we absolutely come out. We had, I believe in the stats, about 45 calls where we actually had taken in like either sick or injured wildlife.
Okay, that's good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ranjima.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation, John. I have a question about a couple of years ago, we had an appeal of a muzzle order that came to us for review, and I think that we chose to alter the order. I think we removed the requirement that the dog be muzzled when it's on its own property, but I might not remember the details completely correctly. So I'm wondering if there's an opportunity for us to receive a follow-up on the results of our decision. And if we did, I apologize, but I don't remember receiving that. But I think it's important that, they're few and far between. I think that's the second one in the whole time that I've been on council, but I think it's important that we be aware of the consequences or results of our decision.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, we can definitely provide that. We keep a very intensive database of all the calls that we attend and all of the outcomes. The outcome, honestly, might be that there is no follow-up. So once you hold your tribunal and that order gets passed down, if we don't receive any further complaints regarding that incident, we close that file down. But I can definitely follow up with you and see what's on file. And if there has been any, officers having to attend again, I would usually hear about it if it is a muzzle order appeal and the fact that the muzzle order was removed. Usually the officers will come to me or our enforcement manager for some, but usually we're all pretty involved in it. But I can definitely get you that information.
Yeah, no news is good news, right? So
right.
That'd be good to find out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Michalak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the delegation. Just one of your areas of expertise is handling lizards, alligators, and snakes, and this sort of thing. I don't see that we had this issue or problem in the town of Lincoln. Is this happening in other municipalities? Was there many calls of this nature requiring that specialized sort of handling in Niagara this past year?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Absolutely. Niagara is actually a hotspot for the reptile industry. There's quite a few reptile keepers throughout Niagara. There's probably a lot in Lincoln that you don't know about. They tend to keep it quiet. We usually hear about the ones that don't keep it quiet. And like any pet ownership, there's good handlers, there's poor handlers. So to maybe just to give you a little bit of clarification on it, and when I was a no SPCA inspector, I was a cruelty inspector before I assumed this position for 17 years for the Niagara region. I led Ontario's largest reptile removal, and I took 235 reptiles out of a small pre-war home in Welland, and two of the crocodiles we removed were 17 feet long and 20 feet long, and numerous venomous snakes. So they're in the Niagara region, trust me, and we deal with it, and it depends on the bylaw, but I mean, the exotic pet bylaw is very, very important for each of the towns or municipalities to have, because that gives us the power then to go in. We want to see responsible, like something like a little corn snake, people be allowed to have it or kids be allowed to have it, but anything that falls into the venomous or the large category, or once we're into the alligator, we remove it. So part of our mandate with the provinces, we actually have care and control over the reptile safe house, and it is here in Niagara at a secret location for the province to remove those animals and then push them out through the zoos. So I think we've currently got a couple of alligators, a couple of venomous snakes under our care, but that's an undisclosed location we work with the province on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. John, just a quick comment. You mentioned with regards to the leash law fines, you mentioned, you try to use education first and foremost. When I look at the fines, and obviously you're dealing with, 9 different municipalities, I guess, a wide range of fines from $50 up to $300. From your experience, is a higher fine an incentive to leash your dog?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. So yes, absolutely. The higher the fine is definitely, that's going to be more of a deterrent. It's like any fine, I think, that the higher that fine goes, or the higher that you're going to get fined, I definitely think it's a deterrent. Absolutely.
And the money from those fines, where does that money get channeled?
So under the old system, usually what we did was a split of 50-50 with the municipality township. Now any fines that are issued go to the region. So we don't get any of that. So I'm not sure. I believe the town and the region would do the split now, but the society doesn't actually receive any money for it.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I don't see any more questions. John, we want to thank you for coming this evening and the presentation and fielding our questions. Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
You as well.
Thanks.
There being no further questions of the presenter, I have a motion moved by Councillor Pachariva. The council receive and file as information the presentation from John Greer regarding the Niagara SPCA services and the 2021 year review. And I will now ask our deputy clerk to call out the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Regina?
Yes.
Councillor Russell?
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva?
Yes.
Mayor Easton?
Support.
Councillor Timmers?
Yes.
Councillor Reimer?
Yes.
Councillor Micklick?
Yes.
Councillor and Deputy Mayor McPherson?
Yes.
Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. That carries.
Thank you, John. So we are now at 7.2 reports. And we have 2 reports this evening, but before we proceed, I'm going to swing over to our town clerk for some direction on how we proceed this evening.
Thanks, Chair Brunei. So what I would suggest is we move around the agenda a little bit, if council will indulge me. So I'm thinking that we will go straight to the CIP presentation and report, and the official plan update report. We will see what time we reach. I know council has to pass a motion at the hour of 10 o'clock, and then to proceed beyond 10:30. And I believe Devan has that motion prepared, and I'm thinking, Chair Brunei, that we do that considering that it is 20 to 10.
Okay,
And therefore, any items after 10:30, if council so wishes to adjourn at 10:30, that those items would be deferred to another future meeting scheduled. And I do see some hands up there.
Councillor and Deputy Mayor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madam Clerk. And I'm just thinking about those that have been sitting, waiting for several hours now. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't make the decision right now that at least the community services piece of the agenda be deferred to at least allow those folks to call it a night, because I
Exactly.
think that CIPs are going to be lengthy. And, you know, that just, it seems kind of silly to have them sit around till 10:30 until we make that call. So just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, my recommendation was, or thought was the same, to try to keep the CIPs and also the report from the region tonight, and then defer everything else.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pachariva.
Yes, Chair Brunei, I'm fine with that. And I would ask the clerks that CSI become first next time. Because we're always, there's a phrase I want to say, but in the course of decorum, Your Worship, I shall not say it. But I might type it to you.
We appreciate that, Councillor. So what I would say is, if it's okay, Devan is going to read out a motion, although I do have a tentative hold to pursue another future meeting on March 14th. So with that, Devan, I think you have the motion, and we'll just put that date in there in order to defer those items so that it is defined.
No problem. And just to clarify that the motion is that council waive the rules to proceed beyond 10 p.m. until 10:30, and that items 7.2.1, 8.2.1, 8.2.2, 9.2.1, and 9.2.2 be deferred to March 14th, 2022. And with that, I will ask for a mover, please.
Sorry,
Thank
just for clarification, did you say 7.2.1?
Yes.
Yeah, she did include the update from the region. Yeah.
Okay, I thought we had some councillors suggesting that we stick with the 2 reports tonight and get those done. That's what I thought I had heard, but.
Yeah. Councillor Russell
So
made
that-
that suggestion, actually.
So
Yeah,
then
so
it would
we're-
just be items 8.2.1, 8.2.2, 9.2.1, and 9.2.2. So general business and finance, as well as community services and infrastructure.
Correct.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Clerk. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, thank you, Chair. And Councillor Timmers, I had you approving that motion, if that is still okay, or moving that motion. Thank you. And with that, Councillor Regima.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor and Deputy Mayor McPherson.
Yes.
Councillor Russell.
Yes.
Councillor Miklick.
Yes.
Councillor Reimer.
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva.
Yes.
Councillor Timmers.
Yes.
Mayor Easton.
Support.
And Chair.
Yes,
Thank you. That carries.
thank you. So we will now consider item 7.2.1, report PD 10-22 regarding review of draft policies for the Niagara Region official plan update. Do members of council have any questions? Deputy Mayor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so it's been talked about a little bit earlier tonight, but I too flagged the number of 45,660 residents by 2051. And quick math has us looking at an almost 22,000 new residents coming to us over the next 30 years. And, looking at our restrictions with regards to our urban boundary, I'm wondering what that looks like. What does it look like for us in today's world for adding 22,000 residents? And, if I think about Prudhome's and I think about, the numbers probably up in the air tonight, but, I'm thinking maybe 7,000, maybe 8,000 people there. We're talking about 14,000 people somewhere else. And, looking at the restrictions we've got with the Greenbelt and the Niagara Escarpment Commission, and I think the mayor mentioned that, we have 7% of our land mass available to build on. I can't imagine, 10, 15 more 9 or 10-story buildings on Ontario Street in Beamsville. So my question is, what modeling can we do today to show what that looks like to us, to our residents, to put out there, here's the number that we've been dealt. And this is what's driving, some of the high buildings that are coming to the town of Lincoln. So maybe through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Bruder, how would that look, do you think, Matt?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we've done a little bit of work already. Obviously, when we've gone through some of these exercises of looking at, the development that is already underway, i.e., it's going to be entering or is entering construction, but it's not online yet. Therefore, it gets counted towards the future potential growth targets. We've done some mapping exercises in that regard at a preliminary level. I think we can refine those a little bit to provide a little bit, better visual on some of that. And perhaps that can be incorporated into a further report to council to just give a basic idea of where we're at and where we can see some of the numbers being attributed. You're right, some of our vacant areas there, Prudhomme specifically, which we talked about earlier today, and then the GO secondary plan area, definitely two of the major components, but there's a few other areas as well, like I said, that we can look to provide a little bit better of a visual of. And we've already started some of that work, so we can carry forward with that.
Okay, thank you. And I guess, Mr. Chair, just a comment, that there are some municipalities throughout that list of 12, I would assume, that are taking on the heavy load, are taking on, a ton of the growth is going through, a few municipalities. I see West Lincoln is going to, take on a pretty significant number. I think today Thorold is like 18,000 population, and they're forecasted to go to 39. So there are other communities on that list that aren't taking on, what I would see as their share. So how does that work? A Niagara on the Lake, a Pelham, how does it work that they, even Grimsby today, I think is 33 or 35,000 people, and they're looking to go to 37 in 30 years. So how does that work that there are those municipalities that are taking on the load for some others?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that's a good question. Like I was saying earlier, there's a lot that goes into these. The region is handed down a general growth allocation for the entire region by the province through the growth plan. They undertake consultation with the local area municipalities to inform them on, what the development trends are, what the level of development activity is. And then they look at the vacant lands and available opportunity to do so. You mentioned yourself, that, we don't have a particularly big land mass, but there is an opportunity identified through some of the secondary plans. And again, in kind of, this narrative coming down from the province and this policy formation coming down from the province that, the market trends that we're seeing around here, well, that's, in part dictated by migration coming from the GTA, but also just the provincial direction too, accounts for that. It doesn't really factor in the market trends the same way as it does if there are market trends that are suggesting a rapid amount of growth in the area. Well, then it says we have to utilize our lands as efficiently as possible to accommodate that. So the region takes all that information into account. Some of the other municipalities you mentioned that maybe don't have the growth numbers, or maybe they're not seemingly seeing the number of increase that maybe you would think. There are some of those, I won't sit here and talk about which ones, but I think they've underestimated a little bit the growth that could be happening within their municipality. Perhaps that came through in their collaboration with the region. There wasn't enough of it. I don't know. But I can tell you that when we speak with the region, we're telling them it's based on facts about the development concepts and potentials we're seeing in the area, and those that have already gone through approval too. So that's the level of consultation we had with the region.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pachariva.
Thanks, Chair Bernay, through you to Mr. Bruder. Matt, with respect to competitive regions, so page 6 of 12, where we talk about accommodations. So limit of 6. Now we talk about, and we heard it earlier this evening on farm diversification, and we saw a couple applications come forward. Are we like, we're pushing for an increase? How receptive is the region to that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's a good question, because initially the thought is that they were quite receptive. As you know, we've got a few planning applications currently ongoing with numbers a little higher than that 6-unit threshold, and the region had seemed open to considering that in the context of that whole on-farm diversified agritourism lot calculation and whatnot, and the guidelines provided therein. But then, we see in the draft that the 6-room threshold is still included, which is what we intend on commenting on, because I have not seen anywhere in any type of policy, provincial or anywhere else, where there's that actual threshold of 6 units in a bed and breakfast identified. It's better served to be as part of that overall lot coverage calculation. So I think this can be cleaned up fairly easily with the region and further dialogue. They did indicate that they were, on board with that. So I think it's just a matter of further clarification.
Okay, great. And not only the aspect of lot coverage, but the whole enterprise needs to be viable for the farmer, right? He's got to make a buck at it. So if it's 8, if it's 10, whatever that number is, site specific for their operation. And we heard earlier this evening from Byron, the educational component opportunity there. So I look forward to your continued dialogue and pressing. And then my second question, if I may, with respect, and I had a chat with Mr. Neubauer this afternoon. So connected region. So talk about transportation master plan and strategic cycling networks. Now, knowing that the region doesn't own a lot of land that these networks are going to go on to, are they coming to us with financial incentives? And then when we redo a regional road, in the past, the paved bike lanes were always the first ones to go as a cost-cutting method. So how committed are they to this? Like, can we hold their feet to the fire and say, as earlier, you shall do this, right? It becomes a commandment, right? Thou shalt build bike lanes, thou shalt commit to expanding the cycling network.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's a good question too, and I think they are committed because, as concurrent to this regional official plan update, they're also undertaking a complete streets policy framework as well that they're putting together, and in that they're identifying different cross-section requirements for different road roads based on road classification and whatnot. And in those cross sections, there are requirements for active transportation facilities. So, you know, I would say if they're looking to implement their complete streets policy framework, then they are committed because it's right there in terms of what needs to be included on regional roads. So I think that whole thing is intended to provide a little bit more framework and context to that. So
Okay.
hopefully that answers your question.
Monetarily committed, Matt?
Through your Mr. Chair, I assume so based on the fact on what they're putting forward. So
Okay, but you know what happens when we assume. So I'll leave it at that. I ask you keep pushing, Chair, Director Bruder. So thank you.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Bruder. Again, similar to my line of questioning earlier on the growth targets, and also in line with what Councillor McPherson was asking about earlier in this session. Again, you mentioned that there could be possibly a report to come back to give some more insight into how that number was achieved. It is such an integral number for a lot of our policies, a lot of our decision making, and I think it is absolutely incumbent that council understands fully how that number was achieved, and what work was done to come to whatever processes were to come to it. So I put forward a motion to the clerk. Again, I'm not sure if she wants to read it off or if she'd like me to read it off.
Through the chair, thanks, Councillor Russell. I'm just going to share my screen if that's fine, so that council can have a chance to review it. And give me one moment, please. And you just sent this a moment ago, so give me one moment to share. And just confirm that council can see this. Okay. Whereas the Council of the Town of Lincoln recognizes the importance of growth and development. However, it is of critical importance for council to understand the processes that were followed in determining the growth target of 45,660 by 2051. Therefore, be it resolved that staff will provide council with a report on the process that was followed to achieve the growth target set forth for the Town of Lincoln. This report should include the key metrics provided, the timelines of submission, and the parties that were consulted on the deliverables. Be it resolved that this report should come back to council prior to our ratification of our new zoning bylaws, and this has been moved by Councillor Russell and seconded by Councillor McPherson. And so, Chair, you will, since that is on the floor, so to you and the Deputy Clerk, you will open that up for comments to that motion that Councillor Russell has put forward.
Absolutely. Mayor, then please go ahead with your question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to make sure that I can't remember the date. I don't know the date of when those numbers were put forward. There's quite a bit that's happened in terms of the discussion of the regional official plan, including a substantial discussion under the natural heritage components, which is intended to remove certain lands from development. And also more recently, we've had the boundary adjustment report, and there is now just starting a substantial opposition to the boundary adjustments because of their relationship to the natural heritage component. It's my understanding as well that there is that Grimsby is at capacity, so we probably should confirm whether or not that's fact or not. And the contribution that both market and location to the Queen Elizabeth Way plays in some of the numbers, whereas they wouldn't be impacted in others. So just add that as some modifications that probably have occurred since that number was submitted. Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mary Easton. Councillor and Deputy Mayor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would like to add to that, that motion, the modeling piece that we would look at where the growth is going to come from over the 30-year period. And I would say we need to do it based on what we know today. What we know about our urban boundary today, where is that increase in residents going to come from specifically? So I would add a modeling of the 22,000 new residents and where do we see them residing?
Madam Clerk, can we?
That sounds like an amendment to that motion. Councillor McPherson, I just want to make sure that I have it correctly, that you would like to see the target metrics.
Madam Clerk, I would second that.
Yes. So Deputy Clerk, it would be a modeling, create a model showing the added residents to reach and their location within the urban boundary for the 2051 target.
Thank you. And with that, I do see the CAO's hand up. However, Chair, after that, we do need to take a vote on that amendment.
Yes, yes. CAO Acropolis, please go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to try to figure out how we manage some expectations. I just want to say that I think staff will work with the region to get all of that modeling. I know a lot of the modeling that the region was using also tried to incorporate how we think people will live 30 years from now. It is a generation from now, how we think people will travel, whether it be through transit, whether it be through higher order transit. You know, we're talking about GO, we're talking about other sorts of things. So there was a lot of, I know we got an extensive presentation at a recent CAO's meeting. A lot went into it. So we will work with the region to see how much of that we can get, and maybe even have the region share a little bit of that, because again, I think we're basing today's knowledge and today's assumptions on people wanting to live the way we live today, single family homes or towns, the types of properties we have. 30 years from now is a long time horizon. So we will do what we can to get council as much information as possible. The initial core motion from Councillor Russell, I think will be a little bit easier in terms of data and metrics. The modeling is going to be because others were asking that same question, Councillor McPherson. But again, we will do what we can.
Yeah, thank you, CAO. I mean, you know, obviously, you know, Councillor Reimer, you know, brought up something earlier, you know, this evening when we were talking about, you know, the region redoing the official plan. Our official plan needs to align. You know, we've got a zoning bylaw that's 30 years old. So, you know, what's the rush? What are we doing? But you know, where's the balance? If the region's not going to be ready with their official plan, you know, are we prepared to put our zoning comprehensive bylaw on hold for, you know, an extended period of time? I guess that's the question we need to ask. Mr. Bruder.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think, yeah, I just, again, kind of echoing what our CAO just mentioned, from a modeling perspective, it's kind of hard for me to tell you guys exactly where and how much development is going to grow on every single site. Like I said, a lot of site-specific technical, you know, studies and whatnot goes into that. I just can't point to that and say, yep, that one's going to be a certain amount of units. I can tell you what the density is, and then I can tell you it might be a potential site for more. But until we actually get a development application, until we get into that feasibility analysis that comes with some of these potential proposed increases, it can be hard to say. But as our CAO said, I will definitely do the best I can. I can talk to you about, you know, definitely about the process that went into working with the region on some of these targets. And then just to dovetail, Mr. Chair, you mentioned about our zoning bylaw, and are we prepared to put it on hold? I think, ultimately that option, I guess, can be on the table. But as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of aspects of our zoning bylaw update that, still can move forward. We're still considering the work that the region is doing on their official plan to date. It's not all just about the growth numbers. We've got policies pertaining to agricultural diversification, accessory dwelling units, and the need to provide some more flexibility there. I think there's definitely aspects that can be brought forward sooner. And again, I stick to my initial comments that if you keep waiting for all the policy documents to align, you could be waiting an awfully long time before you bring something forward. So those are my comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I certainly understand that there is assumptions that we will need to make in doing that modeling. And I think we are open certainly to the region's thinking around how people will be living differently 30 years from now. I really don't know if 30 years is enough time to change the way people are going to be living. That would to me assume that our transit is going to have a significant uptake and that people are going to be getting out of their cars. But I do understand completely that this is our best estimate. But the fact of the matter is, we know where the urban boundary is, and we know what the number is that they're handing to us. So we've got to be able to find a place for that. And I'm not suggesting that we, build buildings or show buildings necessarily in a modeling, but I am suggesting that we say, okay, in this particular location, we're expecting another 6,000 people to move in here, somewhere along this corridor, and we expect that 8,000 people are going to be over at Prudhome's or whatever. So we can do that. That gives us an idea of where is this growth going to go. That we just don't have the ability like West Lincoln does to open up their urban boundary, and we are looking at major intensification. If this is the number we're going to take on, it is going to change our landscape significantly. So I think that, I get what you're saying. I do agree that it's not easy, but I think we've got to do the best we can to really look at where is it going to go. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mary Easton.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I'm probably hearing a lot more opposition overall because of all the people that spoke tonight and all the people that spoke at several other meetings that we've had, there have been two people, one tonight who mentioned, had a broader perspective on land use. And we had another person on another occasion. That's two people. And I hear a lot more from people that are dealing with the natural heritage concerns. I do believe that we need to do some modeling, even if it's a bit rough around the edges, because when you don't have acceptance that to the changes that are coming, and the council is being held accountable for provincial policy as opposed to us being seen as the regulators, we have a major problem on our hands. And it doesn't matter who's sitting in these seats. That policy is not changing, and those demands are not going to change either. So I think the best we can do, and I've always believed this, the more involvement we have with the public, I think our staff are very, very good at this. They meet people wherever they need to meet them in order to have their concerns addressed. We need to continue to do that, but there should be no surprises here at all. And I'm not sure how we get our community to the point where we start having a different kind of conversation, because I think there's a lot of valuable input that is available to us. We're just not going to hear it as long as we're saying, how are we going to do this? And the public are saying no. I said it earlier, we'll find ourselves perpetually at the land tribunal, and they'll be sending us away pretty quickly because we've not utilized the appropriate policies. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to be realistic.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, and I appreciate that. And I think those comments are bang on. I would even go so far as to say, we were starting to hear those numbers. Chair Mikulak and I sat in a meeting with some staff. You were on the call, Madam Mayor, probably 6 months ago. I think it's time, that we're not hiding anything. These numbers are coming at us from the province. It's 45,000. I think we should be putting that out in a press release so that everyone knows what the expectations are. There's no hiding it here. That's how I feel. Deputy Clerk, we have a motion on the floor that we need to deal with.
Through you, Chair, yes, we actually have an amendment to that motion first, and then the motion overall. I do see Councillor Regima's hand popped up.
Yes, I do see that as well. Councillor Rinjima, go ahead, sorry.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to suggest an amendment, but maybe I'll wait and hear what the amendment that's coming forward is. Might be similar to what I was going to suggest.
Okay.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I will go ahead and read Councillor McPherson's amendment, which was that staff include a modeling structure showing the added residents and their locations within the urban boundaries for the 2051 growth target. And that's the amendment to the motion from Councillor Russell.
Is there any way you could you put that up on the screen?
I sure can. Give me one moment.
Thanks.
Divan, just bold where the amendment is.
I've actually just scrolled down, so that's the amendment there.
Perfect.
And Councillor Rinjima, were you looking at doing an amendment to the amendment, or are you okay with this?
I'm wondering, I can't see the wording to the original motion. Is that also on the same page? There it is. Okay. I'm wondering if council would be open to just amending the motion in line with what Mr. Bruder said, that there may be consideration giving to moving forward parts of the zoning bylaw as opposed to all, and as opposed to holding it all back. Maybe we can hear a little bit more about that, or just change the motion to say that consideration be given to moving those portions of the zoning bylaw that can move forward.
So for clarification, just to clarify what we are currently considering, it's the amendment to the motion. So only this is what we are considering at this time.
Okay.
After we vote on this, we'll vote on the motion as a whole.
Sure.
If that helps.
Yeah, that does.
Chair, are you okay if I called the vote to the amendment to that motion?
Absolutely, Deputy Clerk, please. Oh, Councillor Patrick, you have a question with regards to the amendment?
I do, Chair Brunet. So just and if I may ask Councillor McPherson, so Councillor, your amendment there, you're not looking for, and you said this, you're not looking for site specific, you're looking for numbers per community, correct? Is that what you're?
No, I'm looking for more than that. I'm looking for where are they?
Oh, you are? Okay.
Absolutely. I don't need to see, we're going to have, 10-story buildings. I don't need to see that, but I do want to see in the Ontario Street corridor, we're going to add 14,000 people or whatever the number is.
Okay.
That's what I think we need to have.
Okay, I see our CAO with his hand up, Mr. Krikopoulos.
Through you, Mr. Chair. And so I think Councillor McPherson scoped it down a bit. So we'll try to get it that scoped, Councillor. It may be a little bit on a larger quadrant basis. So I'm just looking back and trying to see some of the notes we got. I may not be able to get you Ontario Street, but I think we'll try to get you as specific or as focused as possible.
Okay, let's proceed with the vote on the amendment, please.
Thank you, Chair. And to clarify, that is that staff include a modeling structure showing the added residence locations to reach their location within urban boundaries for the 2051. And with that, Councillor McPherson, I have you as the mover, and I'll call you to vote first.
Yes.
Councillor Micklick,
Yes.
Councillor Reimer,
Yes.
Councillor Timmers,
Yes.
Mayor Easton,
Support.
Councillor Pachariva,
Yes.
Councillor Russell,
Yes.
Councillor Rajima,
Yes.
and Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. That amendment carries. Through you, Chair, would you like me to proceed to the motion then?
Yes, please.
Perfect. And with that, does council like me to share my screen again so you can read the motion one more time? Yes, no problem. Okay.
Yes, please.
Oops. So, whereas Council of the Town of Lincoln recognizes the importance of growth and development, however, it is of critical importance of council to understand the processes that were followed in determining the growth targets of 45,660 by 2051. Therefore, be it resolved that staff will provide council with a report on the process that was followed to achieve the growth targets set forth for the Town of Lincoln. This report should include the key metrics provided, the timelines of submission, and the parties that were consulted on the deliverables. It will add this motion up here that staff include a modeling structure showing to added residence locations to reach their location within the urban boundaries for the 2051. And then be it resolved that this report should come back to council prior to ratification of our new zoning bylaw. And with that, I have Councillor Russell as the mover.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. Councillor Rinchima?
Yeah, I was going to suggest, if you don't mind, wording that consideration be given to moving forward those parts of the zoning bylaw that can be moved forward, still with consideration of the rest of the motion. Can you reshare that, please?
I can reshare this. One moment.
Thank you. Be it resolved that this report should come to council prior to the ratification of our new zoning bylaws, and that consideration be given to ratification of portions of the zoning bylaw that can go forward separate from.
So you're looking to make an amendment, Councillor?
Yeah, I'm just having trouble wording it, but just as Mr. Bruder said earlier on, there may be parts of the zoning bylaw that can be ratified in advance.
Yeah. So the CAO has his hand up to talk to that.
And I'm just going to stop sharing my screen while discussion's happening.
Thank you.
So
Mr. CAO, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I think I understand where Councilor Rajima is going with this motion, but our goal is to have this information to you in fairly short order. This in no way should delay what we're doing with zoning. So I don't want, I shouldn't say I don't want. I don't know if a motion is needed, Councilor Rajima, because, you know, we plan on having this back to you pretty quickly.
Okay, good.
The region has this information, like I'm sure they do. We'll put that in a report format and get it on the next agenda for you.
Thank you. I'm happy with that. Thank you, Mr.
You're okay
Chair.
with that? Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Deputy Clerk?
Thank you. Through you, Chair, would you like me to go back to the motion so we can all clarify? No? Okay. So we have a move by Councillor Russell, and with that, I'm going to ask Councillor Russell for his vote, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Rajima?
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva?
Yes.
Councillor and Deputy Mayor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Micklick?
Yes.
Counselor Reimer,
Yes.
Counselor Timmers,
Yes.
Mayor Easton,
Support.
and Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. That carries as amended.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. So there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Reimer to receive report PD 10-22 regarding the consolidated draft policies for the Niagara Region official plan update. I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to call out the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Counselor Micklick,
Yes.
Counselor Reimer,
Yes.
Counselor Timmers,
Yes.
Mayor Easton,
Support.
Counselor and Deputy Mayor McPherson,
Yes.
Counselor Pachariva,
Yes.
Counselor Russell,
Yes.
Counselor Rajima,
Yes.
Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. That carries.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. We will now consider item 7.2.2, report AD 02-22 regarding Community Improvement Plan Review, draft incentive programs. Our CAO will provide some introductory remarks. Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of council. I'm just going to ask you to pull up the presentation. Madam Clerk.
One moment.
This will be a joint presentation, members of council. There'll be a presentation that Ms. Dale, Mr. Deanne, and Mr. Wagner, as well as myself, will take part in. Once we're done the presentation, we will be able to answer any questions council may have. Next slide. So the purpose of today's meeting, or today's presentation, really is to come back to you on something that we were directed to go back and study. Councillor Russell had a motion that was brought forward, and that motion really was to look at our CIP program, to start doing some comparators of that CIP program, a little bit of background research. What are some best practices? How are other municipalities within Niagara and other comparators that are similar doing around CIPs and municipal CIPs? We also did some initial public and stakeholder consultation through Speak Up Lincoln. And so really we're in front of you to share with you where we're at in that first step of the review process, looking at our programs. You'll hear a summary this evening of that. And there's a slide towards the end of the presentation that really speaks to, I think, where we want to go moving forward. I'll say it now, and Ms. Dale will echo it towards the end of the presentation. We heard council. We've heard where you want to be. I think a number of you around our CIP programs, make them more focused, kind of tighten up criteria and the way we're giving out these particular monies, focus it on priorities of council and align money distribution to priorities and the metrics that go along with that. Also, I think it's important, again, this is just one step in our CIP review. We are not making decisions this evening. Next slide. So a little bit of an agenda, and then I will turn it over to the team to take you through this. We're going to talk a little bit about the program and the comparisons, as I mentioned, affordable housing. So just the important part of what we're doing. We have our own committee that 4 members of council sit on around housing, and we're part of a number of regional tables. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about affordable housing incentive programs, best practices, both just generally as well as in the area of affordable housing, needs of the community and a public survey. And then we're going to get into the financial analysis, some draft incentive programs, and share with you as we wrap up what we found and some next steps. So I will now turn it over to Kathleen. Thank you, members of council. Next slide.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. It's actually
turn it over to Mr. Deanne. My apologies.
That's okay, no problem. Good evening, members of council, Mayor Easton. So as the CEO directed or indicated, part of the motion that council had passed was to initiate the CIP review, and staff were asked to investigate other municipalities both inside and outside of Niagara. So as you saw in the report that Ms. Dale had presented this evening, staff added some additional municipalities that were not identified in the original motion from council to ensure our comparison was comprehensive and extensive. So staff investigated 28 municipalities listed here with a specific focus on affordable housing incentives, knowing that this is a topic of interest to council. Next slide. So I know a lot of this information presented here this evening is in the report that's being discussed, but the 10 most prevalent programs that municipalities have are listed here. So our research, and I know Director Dale will include most of this information in her conversations or subsequent slides. Staff identified that municipalities are incentivizing and utilizing these programs to incentivize downtown redevelopment, mixed-use development focusing on commercial growth, TIGs to increase assessment growth, commercial industrial development, affordable housing, heritage properties, and property building improvements, to name a few. So the most prevalent programs across all municipalities are TIGs, which are used for a combination of brownfield development, affordable housing, industrial commercial, seniors housing, and office commercial. So on the slide in front of you are the 10 most prevalent programs that we identified. So looking at the numbers on the right-hand column, so from the 28 municipalities that we looked at, 27 have TIGs, 24 have facade improvement programs, 20 have DC reduction programs, and so on down the list. So I know Director Dale will be going into a bit more detail in subsequent slides, especially as it pertains to affordable housing. So if I can, next slide, and I'll turn over to Director Dale. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So in regards to affordable housing, we previously provided a bit of a very preliminary summary to our Affordable Housing Committee. And then what we did is we looked at some CIPs in more detail. And what we found is that the most common programs were tax increment financing, development charge reduction, reductions to planning or building permit fees, grants for additional residential dwellings or secondary dwelling units. And what secondary dwelling units are additional residential units within low density areas, which are permitted by provincial policy. Next slide, please. So as part of this exercise, we did look at a number of CIPs. And what we tried to do is identify some of the best practices, evolving practices. And that does tend to come out in some of the newer CIPs versus some of the much older CIPs. So as an example, when we're looking at TIGs, traditionally, you might do a grant that was, I don't know, 80% for 10 years or 8 years or something like that. But newer TIGs tend to have a reduced term, so a shorter number of years. And then the percentage amount of the grant gets decreased as the years go on. And really the reason for that is by changing the percentage and the term of these TIG grants, what it does is more of the increase in taxes as a result of the development is realized by the town much sooner than the former method. Some of these have minimum increases in assessment, and that's to maximize tax increase. And larger grant is there's eligibility criteria, and then only the projects that rank the highest would be for funding. And really what the purpose of that is competition's always good to get better projects. Previously, council did direct us to provide DC grants only for affordable rental units. And as part of our survey, we did find that really was a trend with a lot of the newer CIPs. Next slide, please. It's quite common in a lot of CIPs that there's going to be minimum criteria as it relates to environmental sustainability features to mitigate climate change. To improve our commercial tax base, you'll see things like in a mixed use project, that the minimum ground floor area is used for commercial purposes. And then depending on the type of CIP, there's also minimum project costs. And this is so that you get more fulsome applications or larger scale developments. There's pretty much all facade and building improvement grants have a maximum total grant. There's always agreements in place, which is a practice that we currently have, as well as requirements to complete the works within certain timeframes. So as an example, when a facade grant is approved, the applicant would have to complete the work within a year versus a larger project that may take 3 years for construction. Next slide, please. So in regards to the affordable housing best practices, as I mentioned previously, staff did look at a lot of CIPs with affordable housing incentives. These CIPs do tend to be much newer CIPs, and I think that's really because affordable housing has become very much a critical need in the last little while. A lot of those incentives, as I mentioned in the previous slide, were TIGs, development charge reductions, fees, secondary dwelling units, and then small projects. And there have been some that provide a grant for cash in lieu of parkland. The trend that we're seeing is to limit a lot of the affordable housing grants to rental. Some of them are a grant and some are a deferral of DCs. There's also a lot of these also have conditions in place. So for example, if there's a DC grant for affordable housing and should that say rental unit cease to become affordable, they must pay their DCs. Similar to other TIGs, we do see a decrease of the term of the TIG. Again, we also see environmental sustainability and design features. And as well, depending on the type of incentive, there are terms for the unit to remain affordable. What we've done with the drafts is we've tried to align them with the regional minimums. As well, we do see a minimum percentage of affordable units in a project. And as part of the affordable housing draft incentives, there is further consultation with the housing committee planned. Next slide, please. Okay, Paul's going to discuss the next slide.
Thank you, Kathleen. So as part of our CIP review, staff launched a Speak Up Lincoln page to help inform and engage our residents on the future of Lincoln CIPs. So on the Speak Up Lincoln page, we did lay out the goals of the review, as well as provide some useful information that has previously been presented to council, such as past reports related to our CIP programs. So thus far, the Speak Up Lincoln page has been visited close to 200 times, with 83 of those visitors clicking on links and reports on the page and such. In addition, staff launched a survey to help garner feedback on the direction that residents and businesses would like to see our CIPs take. So close to 50 individuals have filled out that survey, and on the screen in front of you are the responses to one of the questions. So if I can read it here, in the current CIP programs, if the current CIP programs were amended to promote developments and improvements that also address specific community priorities, which would be the most important to address? So this was a ranked question, meaning that respondents had the ability to rank these, all these elements from 0 to 10. And the top responses that we saw were to support assessment growth and generate new taxes, increase the supply of tourist accommodations, adaptive reuse of heritage buildings, improvements to open spaces, low impact development standards and environmental sustainability, as well as climate change mitigation, and of course, affordable housing. In addition, I wanted to highlight 2 additional questions that were asked. So one, do you support financial incentives for the creation of private and not-for-profit affordable housing? Close to 70% of respondents said yes. In addition, for financial incentives for affordable rental housing, it is anticipated that the town will require the applicant to enter into an agreement requiring that the dwelling units remain affordable for a minimum length of time. Do you support this requirement? And over 85% of respondents said yes. So happy to provide some of the raw data if council wishes to see or are interested in seeing that. But I think next slide, Madam Clerk, and we'll be going over to Director Wagner. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, my camera doesn't seem to be working at this point in time. Currently, oh, now it is. Currently, we have Watson and Associates doing a financial analysis for us to look at all of our DC funds. So we're doing a development charge update. And I've asked them at the same time to look at all of our future demands related to development charges, related to program spending for the CIP. So the Community Infrastructure Program, to make sure that we have adequate funding, not only for today, but for the foreseeable future. We only allocate a small portion of our budget, tax levy, approximately 105 per year, 105,000 per year to support the CIPs. The rest is usually taken from DC reductions or tax increment reductions. So we've asked them to look at our existing programs. We've asked them to look at our current demand, our current allocated funding to make sure that the funding is sufficient and supportable for the longer term. We've also asked them to look at the proposed or the draft types of programs that we're potentially proposing to ensure that we have available funding for those in the future. At this point in time, as the review goes on, we're asking that no additional applications be accepted or approved within the existing CIPs or the new CIPs until we have a better handle on our financial outlook for these types of programs. Next slide, please.
Okay, thank you. So in regards to the draft incentive programs, right now, some of the programs have some criteria. They're very much minimal. So what we found is it's important that all of the programs have some minimum criteria. I mentioned previously that the TIG programs do have detailed criteria so that you can rank applications. These, in regards to the incentives, we're looking at changes to some of the existing programs, some consolidation of programs, and some new programs which focus on affordable housing. Along with the incentive programs, there will be some revised funding. We're also trying to align these programs with the region's programs, and the reason for that is it also helps you maximize funding for a program if there's also regional funding proposed. And this is very important when you get to affordable housing. As Paul mentioned, we have considered council's priorities in the input from the Speak Up Lincoln project surveys. And two of the appendices that are attached to the report have more of the questions and the answers to those questions. As our CAO mentioned, at this point, we're not asking for any sort of endorsement. We do need much more further consultation on this before we can complete our financial analysis and do a new CIP. Next slide, please. So in regards to our draft incentive programs for housing, if you look on the screen, there's 3 of them that are highlighted in blue. The reason these are highlighted in blue is because those 3 programs are either part of our current and also the region's development charges bylaw, or they're a mandatory DC Act exemption or deferral. So what I've done here is I provided these for information. Those wouldn't typically be included in a CIP, but because we're also reviewing this information with our housing committee, I thought it's important to also show the programs that are attributable to our development charges bylaw. Or so in regard attainable rental housing DC reduction. So really what that is for is it's what I would call the profit rental market, because what we need not only affordable rental units, but also there is a need for market rental units. We're also looking at an affordable rental housing TIG, a small building rental grant. Now this was previously referred to in the 2 of the CIPs as affordable residential grant. The Regions program provides funding for 5 units. Our current proposal is 4. So we're proposing to increase that to 5 to align with the program. Plus we're trying to also use similar names to some of the programs that the region is involved in, because it would be easier for the public and stakeholders to understand. The residential rental grant, as I mentioned, this is for what we call secondary dwelling units. So under our official plan, within a single detached dwelling, you can add one additional unit and one unit within a detached structure. That's permitted as of right in the official plan and under provincial policy. The details are being tweaked through the zoning bylaw update. So the intent of this is, because we do have a lot of low density areas, these are permitted as of right. So there is the opportunity to try and provide some additional rental units in these locations, because they are going to be permitted as of right. A cash in lieu of parkland dedication fee. Now this would only be for what we refer to as the affordable or attainable rental units. Any units that are market rent or ownership type units would still pay the cash in lieu of parkland, as well building and planning permit fees for those developments that include attainable rental units. Next slide, please. So we also looked at our programs for what's referred to as brownfields. These two programs are currently, they're in the CIPs, but they're deferred, which means they're inactive programs. The reason for that is the town does not have some brownfields, but not brownfields to the extent that some of our larger municipal partners have. So what is being recommended is elimination of the brownfield tax assistance, because we think, funding can be provided through a TIG, and then no changes to the environmental assessment. And that grant is to cover studies for brownfield lands. Next slide, please. So in regards to commercial and mixed use, which is the focus of all three of these CIPs, again, in blue is the DC deferral for commercial uses. That's a mandatory DC Act deferral. So we're proposing to eliminate the development charge reduction. That is already in place for those three CIPs as per previous direction of council. We are looking at reducing the percentage and the term to, instead of right now it's 80% for anywhere between 5 to 7 years, depending on the applicable tax increment grant. We're looking at reducing it to 60% for years 1 and 2, 40% years 3 and 4, and 20% for year 5. However, we do have a number of priorities, and those are tourist accommodation, mixed use, where not only the majority of the ground floor, but the second floor are used for commercial purposes, or brownfields, or where 25% of the units are affordable. These are some of the priorities of council. So we feel that in those instances, the tax increment grant should be slightly higher, with 80% at years 1 and 2, 60% for years 3 and 4, and 40% for year 5. Next slide, please. So the next set of incentives fit within what I refer to as the public realm category. So right now we have a building improvement and facade improvement grant. We're looking at increasing the funding where they have additional environmental sustainability features. So those might be if somebody's doing a building improvement grant and they include a green roof or what's referred to as high albedo roofing materials. Basically, it's a white roof, so it reflects the sun. So the funding could be increased for those features. And we're also looking at adding outdoor patios and public realm improvements. And those types of improvements are the types of things that draw people to areas. I think you'll notice that through the last 2 years of the pandemic, we've had an awful lot of our businesses do improvements or add outdoor patios, and that really has helped the businesses. And I do see that as continuing into the future. We're also looking at, similar to other municipalities, that the facade improvement can be increased for properties with larger frontage. And then I'm also looking at collapsing the landscaping and urban design study eliminating those and including the funding in the facade improvement grants, because they're already actually a component of those two particular grants. Next slide, please. So in summary, basically, given the current market conditions, we don't see the need to incentivize what I refer to as standalone residential development. We don't need to incentivize mixed use to the level that we're doing. So what we're proposing to do is reduce the TIG term and the percentage over the term. Where mixed use is to be incentivized, we need to ensure that these projects have a decent amount of commercial floor space, because we need to increase our commercial tax base and we need to create jobs. So in summary, what we're looking at is moving to incentivize, and we've prepared these draft incentives to reflect this, to target affordable housing, mixed use with a higher amount of commercial floor space, tourism accommodation, because we need to keep our tourist dollars in Lincoln and there's not a lot of places to stay. Green infrastructure and design features to address climate change. We see continuing with facade and building improvement, because it is nice to have buildings improved. And although this is not part of our review, we see continuing with the industrial rural CIP, as those CIPs support tourism, jobs, and economic development as a whole. Next slide, please. So for committee's information, we are now at the prepared draft incentives Q1 2022. And this slide just shows the progression of our CIP review. So if we can go to the next slide, we're open for questions.
Thank you very much, Kathleen and Paul and Lawrence, for the presentation. Thank you very much. I'm seeing Councillor Russell up with a question. Councillor Russell, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the presenters. Again, I'm very happy that this report came back tonight, and I'm very happy to see that there's definitely a lot of progress in there. I see a lot of really good things, and I know that there's still some work to be done, so I'm not going to get too much into the weeds, but I do have a couple of questions. And I know we've talked about this a little bit offline, just to try to tighten things up as we approach whatever the final iterations are going to be. But my first one, slide 15, Madam Clerk, if you don't mind bringing that back up, where we're talking about mixed-use funding. And it's just a point of clarification, either for what is maybe being thought of now, or as we get closer to that final thing. And I'm thinking back to what we had kind of requested, and also what our CAO had talked about being laser focused. So a TIG for a mixed use, if we are, and I understand the need to incentivize to have mixed use, and I'm just thinking on a 25-story building that we have mixed use. Even if the first 2 floors are commercial, which is great, that's what we want. Are we paying this TIG, or is the intention to pay the TIG on the entire building, or just those 2 floors or 1 floor of mixed commercial use?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I could probably answer that. So currently, the way that the TIGs are set up is the grant would be provided for the whole building. Look at, because if you are doing a mixed-use building, only provide the TIG, for example, on the commercial or for the affordable unit. There is a way to do that. So it's something that we can look at. Right now, it's proposed to be applied to the entire building with reduced percentages and a reduced number of years, but it is something that we will take a look at as part of this review.
Okay, thank you for that. And again, I think 100% agree on the affordable piece, the rental piece, the commercial piece, but again, I go back to that laser focus to make sure we're not paying, especially if we're going to eventually get to a point where prudence is going to be included with this, that we're not paying for that, the entire building when really we're only capitalizing on 1 or 2 floors of what we need. Again, we should be trying to be very specific so that every money that is being accounted for this belongs to our residents. We need to make sure that we are doing our due diligence to make sure all of that is protected and it's in the best interest. So that was my first question through you, Mr. Chair. Second question. In turn, and I know there's still some metrics that have to be done as far as the affordability goes. What do you have any inclination yet of how we are going to? It seems that you guys are going towards the attainable definition, which I'm really not sure what that necessarily means. But if we're looking at the affordable purchased units, has there been consideration given to that metric we discussed about tying the square footage, the cost per square foot, to the average cost per square foot for that same home type in the region? Again, I've talked to a couple realtors in the area. The information is available, so it is easy for us to get that information. So if you have a condo, we can find out what that cost per square foot is, find out what the average cost per square foot in the region is. If it's under that, it qualifies. Has there been any thought into that?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So I actually had a discussion with Regional Housing Community Services. It is much easier to come up with for example, an ownership unit, a maximum purchase price. And then when it's a rental unit, it's a certain percentage of their income plus, the costs, utilities and things like that. It is much easier to establish a maximum threshold because the region is responsible for providing those statistics. We do have some information that was recently done by, can't think of the name. I think it was the chief building officials of Ontario who actually came up with some costs for various types of construction for the purpose of the building permit fees. So it is something that we can look at, but the trend does tend to be based on a maximum purchase price.
Okay, and I guess that's fair. And through you, Mr. Chair, my concern is that we're going to continue to see these trends of units shrinking and becoming smaller and smaller and smaller with a fixed price attached to them. And we incentivize that where the well-being of whoever that purchaser is going to get sacrificed just based on that's really the only price point they have the ability to enter into the market with. And if you tie it to square footage, at least it connects price to the size of the unit. Again, if there already is some metric that the region is using or that other municipalities are using to try to make sure that it is in the best interest of the purchaser, again, I will definitely leave it at that. And I think we're definitely heading in the right direction. I really like the long-term rental aspect of it. I'm looking forward to seeing more about that because I know that is a huge need in the community. And I think that's something that we definitely want to make sure we are pushing as much as we can. So I thank you all for that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rinjima.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, thank you very much for all this. Clearly, it was a lot of work. There's a lot of data in there, a lot of information, a lot of ways of looking at this, and not easy to put it together for everybody to be able to review it and comprehend all that information. So very much appreciate all of it. My question is related to the affordable housing incentives, attainable housing. I know within the TIG incentive for housing, it's proposed to be over a 5-year period. And I understand the reasoning behind that. I believe you touched on that earlier, Kathleen, when you were speaking. And I think that the proposal is that these rental units, that we ensure that they remain attainable / affordable for 10 years. So I'm wondering if that makes sense to you to have the incentive go over 5 years and have the requirement that it remain affordable be over 10 years. If that gap makes sense to you, or if there's any reason that we should try to line those up for the rental incentives.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, it is something that we can look at. In regards to if for example, it's a affordable rental housing project. There is going to be an onus on the owner to provide information each year to prove that those units are still being rented for, at the affordable threshold. And the affordable threshold will increase a little bit each year based on figures we get from the region. The other thing I also wanted to mention is part of looking at the affordable housing incentives, there is going to be some further consultation with regional housing, regional community services, and also our housing committee. So I'm hoping that, like these at this point are draft, and we can flush some of this out through further consultation with those two groups.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Chair, I have another question.
Absolutely, go right ahead.
So the only, in those list of proposed incentives, the only one that I'm not sure if I had to cut one thing out, I would consider the facade improvements. Subject to your answer to this question is, where are we currently incentivizing these?
So through you, Mr. Chairman, we're actually incentivizing these in what I would refer to as 3 different CIPs. So the Beamsville CIP, which covers a portion of Ontario Street and also the downtown area, then Vineland in the downtown area. So those are not large grants, but as well, we're also incentivizing it in the rural and industrial CIP. So there is a program where proponents can do some improvements to the agricultural buildings to facilitate tourism. So those are not what I would call large grants. It's your TIGs and development charges that your large grants. The other thing you need to keep in mind is it's also part of the tourist draw and part of the beautification of your municipality. And as a staff member, I would hate to see those ones thrown out. That's just my opinion.
Oh, no, that's fine. I totally understand that.
I'm sure Mr. Deanne can probably add to my comments.
I, by the way, wasn't suggesting that they get.
Oh, okay.
I was just on that list, if something, that would be the one I had the question about. So I appreciate your point that it's one of the least impactful in terms of, financial investment. So thank you for your answers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Timmers.
Thank you very much, Chair Bernay. Through to staff, this is a very, very good report, and it is a lot of work, and I do appreciate it. I think it's laid out very clearly. I was very, very happy to see, the programs around attainable housing, long-term rentals, which we desperately need in our town as well. My only question, under the recommendations, the staff not accept or approve any CIP applications at all until this is finalized. I'm just wondering if there are any applications that are already currently underway. What happens with them? Are they put on hold? Also, would this affect the Heritage Incentive Program? Would that be frozen as well? So I'm not sure who would, maybe through to Ms. Dale.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, that's one of the things that before this recommendation went into the report, staff also did a review of any outstanding CIPs. There are 3 applications currently in process. 2 of them, one of them, the proponent has not moved forward. The other one, the application, where they got approval. So there won't be any applications that would be affected by the temporary hold. And the intent here is that we're looking at this more of a temporary pause, just so that we can really take a much more deep dive of the financial analysis and report back on that, because one of the things we want to make sure is that we can continue to fund the incentives and just make sure that we've got a lot of our financial issues addressed. And I think too, with some of the new proposals that we do anticipate based on applications that are going through a zoning process It will also be important, I think, for some of the new applications to align with the new criteria, because I think you'll end up with a better product.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Michalak.
Thank you, Chair Brunei. Through you to Director Dale, thank you very much for this report. Lots here. The question I have on slide 13 with regards to the housing, the affordable housing, and or now referred to as attainable housing. 80% year 1 to 3, 60% years 4 to 5. What happens on year 6?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, on year 6, they pay the full taxes.
Okay.
So even under a current TIG program, which has a longer time frame, once like right now, some of them are 5, some go up to 8. So in other words, in year 6 or year 9, depending on the current TIG, they still pay the full taxes. What it means is that of the total taxes, the municipality no longer is responsible for paying them a grant. So the municipality gets to keep more of the tax revenue.
Okay, I'm just so this built structure would have to remain in its form or in its state for at least 10 years.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, it really depends on the type of affordable housing incentive. And we have tried to align them with the regional programs.
Appreciate that. So my concern is it possible that we're given too much upfront, and should we be spreading that out over a period of time to ensure that it remains affordable housing? It's just, to me, seems like it's a 5-year, and then it just becomes housing and no longer necessarily affordable housing.
Okay, so through
any turnover in tenants.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chairman, the intent is that if we use the tax increment financing grant as an example, if there's a 5-year term, that is the time frame that the municipality would be responsible after they paid their taxes of providing a grant to them. But if you're going to provide an incentive for affordable housing, even though the grant might only be 5 years, you want to make sure that there's a bit more of a long-term commitment to ensuring that that unit remains as an affordable unit.
Okay, so this would be an affordable, just to clarify, this would be an affordable sort of accommodating building for 10 years. And after that, it can become just market rent or market rent.
It would, so through you, Mr. Chairman, it's going to depend on the different programs. So we have put in, so for example, ownership housing, we were looking at least 5 years. For secondary dwelling units, I believe we're proposing 3 years. There are some programs to align them with the regional funding. They'll have to remain as affordable units for actually 20 years. And the other thing too is with some of these affordable housing projects, some of them, if they're getting Canada Mortgage and Housing funding, the requirement for it to remain affordable could actually be longer than than some of the incentives that we're proposing as draft at this time.
And I do appreciate that, and the 20-year terms that CMHC provides. I'm just, what Lincoln's doing in terms of this and retaining affordable housing and not losing it after the grant or the TIG expires or is no longer in play. That's where I'm looking for a long, sustainable not just a short term. I don't want to find ourselves in this same problem again 5 years, 6 years from now. So that's what I'm trying to, that's my line of questioning. Thank you.
So I think, Mr. Chairman, I think that's it's an interesting point, and as I mentioned, we want to review this with the Housing Committee, and also review it with the region to ensure that we've incorporated best practices when it comes to the term for the units to remain as affordable.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can hear
I'm
you now.
sorry.
Yes, that's okay.
I have two questions, Mr. Chairman. The first one, I was talking with Ms. Dale about earlier today, and this has to do with creating some stability within with the attainable units and the relationship to the number of housing, the number of units that are actually offered to the public as opposed to investors. And I'm bringing this up because I'm hoping that there might be somewhat of a solution to this, because it certainly came across loud and clear at our last meeting regarding Ontario and Green Lane that it was viewed by the community that so many investor owned properties that there was an instability there that they weren't appreciating. And I certainly understand that. So I'm wondering, you know, how can we ensure that with all this, all that we're going through, that when it comes right down to it, the maximum number of units, attainable units, are available to the public first? Is there any strategy that we can use?
So through you, Mr. Chairman, I think there are probably ways we can do this. I think it's going to need a little bit further discussion with our legal representatives, whether the possibility is in place that if an applicant is applying for a grant, can we put a requirement in place that they offer the attainable units or affordable units to the community first before they go out to their investors? It's something that needs some further discussion.
Okay, all right. Well, I think it's it seems that I'll just repeat myself briefly. With all this work that we're going through to make sure that there's attainable housing available, we certainly want to make sure that it's people in the community that can take advantage of that. We're talking about new home buyers, we're talking about seniors moving, and we're looking to have those moves up and down within the community. So that's very good news. And Mr. Chairman, I'd also appreciated if Ms. Dale would then talk a little bit about the impact of the grading system, because I've certainly seen this put in place for a number of reasons, and the results are generally very, very positive. What are we expecting to see that we're not seeing right now when we put this in place?
So through you, Mr. Chairman, CIP, we also do have within our design criteria and all of the projects site plan approval. So we are getting an element of design. We are getting some public realm improvements. One of the harder things that's harder to attain is things like affordable housing and also environmental sustainability, an increase to the commercial component of a mixed-use project. So by having some much more detailed criteria for the TIG grants, I think what it'll do is allow us to fund what I would call the projects that rank higher up for these three CIP areas. So I think there might be a bit more. It's going to depend on the uptake, but I think you'll see a little bit more competition, and I'm hoping that the end result will be better projects for the town.
It's very helpful. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I believe it's on 3 occasions, certainly on 2 occasions, but I believe it was 3. The issue of supporting or not supporting changes with the CIPs has come up. On one of those occasions, for sure, it was a local developer that was involved. In those occasions where developers were impacted directly or indirectly, I did not support the delay. I feel I need to be consistent with that, so I won't be supporting the motion this evening. I think I've reinforced with staff, I think what they provided us this evening is exactly what we were looking for. That laser focus is certainly there, and it helps to refine the discussion, and what our outcomes are going to be will be much more realistic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and 2 questions. One is, I'm looking at Appendix A, and it's the list of community plan incentive programs by municipality. And I just found something interesting in here that, almost all of the communities are offering TIG CIPs, but some major, what I would think would be major hitters, such as St. Catharines, Burlington, Guelph, London, Sudbury, Waterloo, do not offer DC CIPs. And I wonder if they know something we don't know, or if, what the reason would be that they would offer a TIG but no DC.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So sometimes what happens is they don't. It depends on how they provide some of these grants. So there's a couple different ways to do development charge grants, and that is, as I mentioned on the slides here, is you have certain provisions within your development charges bylaw, or you put specific programs in your CIP incentive document. But from the research that I've seen is some of the older CIPs still offer things like development charges reductions, but a lot of the newer CIPs, they're focusing, if they are going to do development charges, they focus them on affordable housing. The other concern that comes up, particularly from our finance folks, is although it's legally okay to provide development charge reduction grants within a CIP area, there's always the concern of using development charge funds, because when municipalities have a very, very large capital project inventory, development charge projects, that you're taking away money from that fund, and you can't make up that shortfall from other development components. So that's probably, it's the focus on affordable housing, but also the impact on their development charge fund overall.
Interesting. And that would possibly be something that we would consider in our review as well.
Yes.
Okay, my second question is to the mayor's comments. So we did see a calendar kind of events, and I think that the target is Q2 of 2022 to have this complete. So we are getting pretty close to the end of, we are at the end of, 2/3 of the way through Q1. So we're looking at something that would be latest the end of June for this thing. to come back at us. We're good with that? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. So I just have one question, similarly to some of the other questions that went on tonight about King Street corridor moratoriums. How how do we deal with this as we're kind of in flux here with any applications that we know are in the queue? If someone's got an application in where they might qualify for, let's just say, an industrial CIP, how are we looking at that? And maybe I can direct it to either Lawrence or to Mr. Deanne.
Thank you, Chair Bernard, and I'll let Director Wagner jump in as well in regards to the financial feasibility study for the CIPs. But I know we do have a number of industrial developments that are in the planning process and are looking to tap into our industrial CIP to help create jobs and such. So I think any applications that we know are coming down the pipeline, we'd have to review and take a look. But I know Director Wagner might want to jump in regards to the financial feasibility study. I know we're maybe proposing a little bit of a pause on the industrial CIP, but the hopes is that we can get that financial feasibility study done fairly quickly. But Director Wagner, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Through you, Chairman Brunet. Yeah, we expect that Watson will have the review done in the next 2 to 3 weeks. At that time, we'll have a better handle on the available funding. I know we spoke to one interested applicant about the industrial commercial funding support from the town, and the region is committed to provide matching funding for them as well. Our commitment or our discussion with that applicant that we are aware of is that if there's funding available, we'll look to potentially support those. But with all due good conscience, I said to him, we need to make sure we look at fiscal sustainability first before we continue to entertain those or go. So if we find out that the funding is available, I would be supportive from a financial perspective on continuing with that application through the rest of the process. And it is only a short period of time. We did offer them other types of financial supports at the provincial level and such to look into. So we're trying to be creative to continue moving the project along as well.
Thank you for those comments. So I would just say that I want to thank, on behalf of Councillor Michalek, Deputy Chair, and myself, want to thank staff, Kathleen and Matt and Paul Deanne have been very, very helpful over the last number of months, keeping us in the loop as to what was happening, meeting with Councillor Russell as well to make sure that we knew that this was being brought along. I think we all appreciate the hard work that's gone into it. I just like to put a stamp on Mayor Easton's comments with regards to the attainability and under today's market with the investors. That was going to be my question. I probably wouldn't have worded it as eloquently as the mayor did, but it is a big concern. We recently looked at a certain project in town where we were told that there were certain people moving in on the ground floor in the next month. We asked about the higher units, and we were told, oh no, they won't be moving in till probably the third quarter or the end of the year because they're all investors. And under today's market, I don't think we even have a clue as to how many of these units are being bought up by investors. And then apparently they go back into a pool and nobody moves in and they get resold. So it's a big concern. And I really think we need to look at this and make sure that we can address this properly moving forward. I don't know how. I guess we have to seek legal advice, but I really think it's a big issue, a bigger issue than we even have any fathoming on what's actually occurring in the sales market when these guys sell out on a weekend. I don't see any other comments. I don't see any other hands. Being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Timmers that council receive for information report AD-02-22 regarding the draft plan, community improvement plan, incentive programs attached as Appendix B. that council directs staff not to accept or approve any community improvement applications within the Beamsville, Vineland, and mixed-use community improvement plan project areas until a new community improvement plan is approved by council, and that council directs staff not to accept or approve any community improvement plan applications within the industrial and rural community improvement plan project areas until the financial analysis is completed. And I see Madam Mayor with her hand up. Madam Mayor, please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, could we separate them so that I can vote on number 1 and we can vote on number 2 and 3 separately as a group? So it would be two votes. I would appreciate that.
Deputy Clerk, can you give me some assistance with that? Do we have the ability to do that?
We do have the ability to move them out to 2 votes. I do want confirmation from the mayor. So the first motion you would like to be read is that council received for information report 80-022-22 regarding the draft community improvement plan incentive programs attached as Appendix B as one motion, and then the other 2 clauses as the second motion.
I would appreciate that. Thank you very much.
No problem. And through you, Chair, am I okay to call the first vote?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Mayor Easton.
Support.
Thank you. Councillor Timmers?
Yes. Yes.
Councillor Reimer?
Yes.
Councillor Micklick?
Yes.
Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva?
Yes.
Councillor Russell?
Yes.
Councillor Rajima?
Yes.
And Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. That first portion of that motion carries. And through you, Chair, may I continue?
Yes, please, Devan.
Thank you. And the second motion will be those second 2 clauses so that council directs staff not to accept or approve any CIP applications within Beamsville, Vineland, and mixed-use community improvement plan project areas until a new CIP is approved by council, and council directs staff not to accept or approve any CIP plans applications within the industrial and rural CIP plan project areas until the financial analysis is completed. And with that, I have Mayor Easton as the mover, and Mayor Easton, I'll call you to vote first, please.
No.
Thank you. And Councillor Rajima?
No.
Councillor Russell?
Yes.
Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Micklick?
Yes.
Councillor Reimer?
Yes.
Councillor Timmers?
No.
Councillor Pachariva?
Yes.
Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. That carries.
Thank you very much. It's been a long evening. I appreciate everyone's patience, and I will go to agenda item number 11. Do we have any committee remarks? I was giving maybe someone an opportunity to talk about a ward meeting. Go ahead, Councillor Timmers.
That would be me. Thank you, Chair Bernay, for reminding me. Tomorrow evening, Ward 4, 6:30 to 8:30. See you there. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. There being no further business, I call this meeting adjourned at 11:23.